First reading from the book of Genesis begins, "The Lord appeared to Abraham at the terebinth of Mamre." And the gospel begins, "Jesus entered a village where a woman named Martha welcomed him." And our scriptures for this Sunday have a lot of good news for us about what it means to allow us to be found by God, to allow Jesus to be present to us. Bible trivia, does anyone know what a terebinth is? Ever heard of a terebinth? It's a tree. Sometimes in some translations of the scriptures it says oak, the oak of Mamre. A terebinth is a big tree that grows in the Middle East and other parts of the world. Just so you know where this spot was, what it was. The terebinth of Mamre, a big tree, and the Lord appeared to Abraham there. I find myself bemused these days. It seems that a game has become popular. It's a kind of an app. It's a phone-based game. It's called Pokemon Go. And apparently the way that you play Pokemon Go is that there are these things to be found. And people go wandering in search of something that's not really there. It's just kind of a signal. And when you reach a certain spot, I'm not sure what happens. You get a little blip or you see the little figure and you've caught one. There it is. You've found one. I did see a news item that in California, 2 people were playing this game and they walked off the edge of a cliff because they were staring at their telephones and they were injured. What's the difference between searching for something that's not really there and allowing ourselves to be found by the God who is present to us? A God that we don't often see and very often don't unless we experience God's presence in someone else. Our first reading and the gospel reading speak about dispositions of allowing oneself to be found by the Lord. And 2 of those that are featured are hospitality and friendship. When the Lord appears to Abraham, he doesn't appear in a very obvious way. Abraham's response isn't, "Oh, God's here." Abraham's experience is that 3 strangers showed up at his campsite where he and his wife Sarah were camping and camped at the terebinth of Mamre. And they began to show these strangers hospitality. They welcomed them, offered them food and drink and rest. Lo and behold, they were messengers from the Lord. Hospitality and a spirit of welcome, a fundamental disposition of allowing ourselves to be found by the Lord. In what state does the Lord find us? Open or closed? In the gospel, we hear a very famous story about 2 friends of Jesus, Martha and Mary. And the interpretation of this story has a rich tradition in the history of the church. Over the course of centuries, it's been interpreted in different ways. Sometimes it was interpreted to mean that 2 ways of life in the church were being compared and contrasted. The active life, lots of busyness and working and worrying and distraction, with the contemplative life of listening to God. And of course, under those circumstances, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. And sometimes we're left somewhat dissatisfied with that kind of approach to the story of Martha and Mary. And I've heard this enough times over the years. I kind of feel bad for Martha, I work hard. What does this mean? I don't think we need to approach the story that way. What can help us is to understand the nature of their relationship Martha and Mary and Jesus were friends. They appear here in a story unique to Luke, but Martha and Mary and also their brother Lazarus appear elsewhere in the Gospels, especially in the Gospel of John. So let me tell you this, if you've ever felt sorry for Martha, you should know that in the life of the church, she's been declared a saint. Her feast day is July 29th. So Martha the worrier has nothing to worry about anymore, and she hasn't had for a great long time. One of the reasons she's named among the saints is that in the Gospel of John, when Jesus comes to their village, Bethany, because their brother, Jesus' friend Lazarus, has died, Jesus declares himself to Martha to be the resurrection and the life, and says to Martha, "Do you believe this?" And her response is, "Yes, Lord, I do. I believe that you are the Christ, the one who is coming into the world." So Martha wasn't so bad. Actually, when I read this story, understanding that Martha, Mary, and Jesus are friends, I hear it like a story about friends being together. And if you think of times that you've had friends over your house, the way you kind of josh and kid around with one another, "Hey, get out here and do some work." Well, someone has to be with the guest. That would be rude. Martha and Mary both working, Jesus twiddling his thumbs outside by himself. "Can I do anything?" No, you just sit. When I pray with this story, I often pray about three people who are enjoying a friendship, kidding with one another, being with one another, being present to one another. I don't know how official that interpretation is, but I'm nourished by it. Because I can relate it to my own experience of what it's like to enjoy friendship. And to experience in friendship, in welcoming, in hospitality that's been offered to me, hospitality that I seek to offer to others, an experience of God's presence and love. But there are deeper lessons about what it means to be found by Jesus and to become his friend and to deepen friendship with him that our readings teach us. One message, it seems to me, is Mary's experience with Jesus. Jesus defends Mary's experience of sitting and listening to his instruction. And he says that this will not be taken from her. We don't hear what Jesus said to her. Maybe that's because it's none of our business. Jesus had a personal message of love and instruction for Mary that he wanted her to hear. And she needed to be free in order to be able to receive it. We don't get to hear what it was because it wasn't meant for us. It was meant for his friend Mary. And Martha also has an important lesson about friendship to teach us. In the midst of her worrying and distractions, which is the experience of a lot of us, and we can feel bad about maybe ways in which we don't let Jesus find us because we don't stay in one place long enough, or we think that that's what it may be about. I think the presence of God to us can be bigger than that. I think the Lord can follow us around pretty well. But Jesus had a message for Martha, and this one we do hear. Martha, you're always worrying and distracted. This is another dimension of friendship. It means having a friend that is faithful and loving enough for us to be able to say something to us that we need to hear in order to come to a fuller maturity, the maturity that St. Paul speaks of in the second reading. Something we need to hear that can set us free because we may be stuck in a place. I was thinking of an experience I had, and it goes back a long way to when I was in college. I went to LaSalle University in Philadelphia back in the late 70s and early 80s, And back then, I was on the rowing team at LaSalle, and most of my friends were rowers. And that was because rowing was very demanding practices. We had morning and the evening, and we were exhausted at the end of them, and there was just no time to have many other kinds of friends. They were all on the team. And there was one of the girls on the women's rowing team. She was a couple years behind me. She came up to me in the cafeteria. I was getting something to eat. She came up to me and said, "Dave, are you okay?" And I remember being sort of put, I was, okay, I'm fine. What do you... She said very simply and plainly, "When I first saw you, the only thing I knew about you was that your name was Dave McGuigan and that you were always smiling. But you don't smile anymore." What happened to your smile? Now, I'm the kind of person, there can be people like this. It can be really a serious affliction. I may be fortunate that I haven't gone too deeply into this, but I'm the kind of person around whom dark clouds can gather. In my mind and in my heart, dark clouds can gather, and I can lose my smile. Someone was willing to say that to me, and that's a real gift of friendship. The only thing I knew about was your name, and you were always smiling, but you don't seem to be smiling anymore. Are you okay? Martha, you're always worried and distracted. Jesus didn't come there to eat. He came there to teach. As we celebrate this Eucharist, finally there is one very profound message about friendship with Jesus that St. Paul expresses. He rejoices that he has the opportunity to suffer for the sake of the love of Jesus. He says, "I'm filling up in my own flesh what is lacking in the afflictions of Christ." What a profound and mysterious thing to say. What could be lacking in the afflictions of Christ who suffered and died for us and rose from the dead? But somehow St. Paul is aware that our participation, our friendship with Jesus Christ includes this experience of suffering in the world along with him. And precious are the friends who are willing to do that with us. Suffer in this world along with us, in order that we may know that we're loved and cared about and supported. Hospitality and friendship. In the spirit of these two great virtues, may we allow ourselves to be found by the Lord.